The final war, the war that ravaged Earth before the events of Stellar Blade, saw the decimation of humankind at the hands of the Naytiba. The Naytiba are the enemy that defeated humankind and pushed some humans to retreat to the colony, an above-orbit structure resembling the wheel-like ophonym from Christian religion that encompasses Earth, created by the artificial superintelligence that serves as humanity's god. The ASI Mothersphere accessed her vast catalog of the humans that inhabited Earth, the unbeknownst android humans, effectively doppelgangers of the real organic human race that preceded the android humans before the events of the Liberation War, to determine a population that would evacuate to the colony, leaving several others behind. During the moments of evacuating the other group of humans to the colony, Mothersphere controlled contamination of the evacuation process through the orbit elevator by detaching modules of the colony that she feared were infected on Earth. Those humans that were recently abandoned by their god, Mothersphere, were left to fend for themselves on Earth against the enemy Naytiba, and were all but wiped out by the modules that rained down from the colony like huge meteors impacting Earth. This wiped out both human and Naytiba alike, and the impacts from the multiple modules of the colony destroyed almost all life on Earth, leaving it a red, barren wasteland. This event, what is known as the colony extinction, and not the Naytiba, is what created the ravaged land we see while playing as Eve in Stellar Blade. There were both human and Naytiba survivors on Earth. The humans that remained on Earth and survived the colony extinction lived in constant attack from the Naytiba, but they were able to find refuge in the last city of Earth, Zion. As Eve descends from the colony, those in Zion believe she and the other angels are there to save them by wiping out the enemy Naytiba and then evacuating them to the colony. Eve contains some battle data on most of the enemy Naytiba that roam Earth. However, due to some extraneous nefarious forces, there are some Naytiba that are unknown to her. As Eve meets the people of Zion and works her way through Stellar Blade's campaign, she uncovers answers to the questions asked. Who or what are the Naytiba? What is their origin? What are their abilities and classes? And ultimately, how do they relate back to her, Stellar Blade's main protagonist, Eve? There was a time on Earth, soon after the creation of Mothersphere, when the androids she created, the Androidos, lived on Earth at the same time as organic human beings in everyday society. In The Nest, Adam states that Earth was too small for both organic human beings and the Androidos to coexist. So it's clear the two species were not able to live in tolerance of one another, let alone live harmoniously in coexistence. It's important to note that all of the remains of Earth's civilization that we see in Stellar Blade are not from the time where real organic human beings lived amongst the androids. Earth was ravaged from war multiple instances by the time Eve dives to Earth in the opening moments of Stellar Blade. The time that organic human beings and the first androids lived concurrently existed only for a handful of years until Mothersphere made a calculated decision to remove organic human beings due to what she called a reclassification of humankind. Essentially, what race of individuals were defined as human. In one of my previous videos here, titled The Liberation War and Mothersphere's Lie, also linked in the description below, through Mothersphere's reclassification of humankind, she chose the androids to make up humanity and influenced the Androidos to initiate a genocidal war against organic human beings in what became known as the Liberation War. By the end of this war, real organic human beings were all but completely annihilated, with a handful of humans fleeing to the underground facilities we see in Stellar Blade, Altice and Abyss Levoire. All the while, the victorious Androidos became the dominant species of Earth, and while doing this, Mothersphere had the androids inherit the title of humankind. She now classified Androidos as humans. Mothersphere erased their memories and fed them the lie that they were and always have been human beings. At this time, Mothersphere led the Andro-Eidos through a new golden age of humankind and helped these new quote-unquote humans achieve incredible gains in technology, construction, and their overall way of life. Now satisfied at having more suitable individuals, the Andro-Eidos hold the title of humankind on Earth, we see Mothersphere provide countless advancements for this new apex civilization, including the construction of the colony, an above-orbit ring-like space station that encircles Earth, the connection of the colony to the 4 orbit elevators around Earth that she already created during the time the organic human beings existed on Earth, the implementation of nano-elements or quantum nerves that made up an android's wires, processors, and even their memories, and the use of polymer materials that operated on a particle-by-particle basis that had almost universal applicability, as they were used in the medical, military, and even textiles and fashion fields. Under Mothersphere, the new humans even took control of the 3 dominant megacorporations, Eidos Industrial Company, Orca Aerospace Company, and Tetrastar, that existed during the time before the Liberation War. The destroyed buildings, crumbling cities, military gear Eve uses, and the outfits she wears are past relics of this time on Earth, the time in which Andro-Eidos held the title of humankind after the events of the Liberation War. The reason I am emphasizing this is to show that real humans, organic human beings, had all of this stripped away from them by Mothersphere and her android race that she claimed were now human beings. Not only did they suffer a drastic defeat at the hands of Mothersphere and the Andro-Eidos, but they also had their place on Earth stolen from them, and their classification as human, their identity, seized. So where does that leave the true organic human beings? With only a handful remaining, true organic human beings fled to Altice and Abyss Levoire and formed the Humanity Liberation Front, a group of organic human scientists and other survivors that worked in secret with the common goal of liberating themselves from the oppressive android race and Mothersphere. This defeated species of organics, who were stripped of their name, used their underground facilities to regroup. Included among these few remaining organics was the creator of Mothersphere himself, Raphael Marx. Raphael Marx and the others most likely looked on at the new human race above ground flourishing under Mothersphere's guidance. They stewed in discontent towards the new humankind, looking for a way to strike back. However, the Andro-Eidos severely outmatched the organics in almost every way: speed, strength, computing power, and intelligence. So in his failed attempt at using technology and artificial intelligence to advance his organic race, Raphael Marx and the Humanity Liberation Front turned to biology and blood to try and evolve the organics to a point where they could contend with the androids above ground. We have to consider that all of the infrastructure of Abyss and Altice Levoire, the labs, technology, and physical underground structures themselves functioned before the end of the Liberation War. What I mean is there is most likely no way the devastated remaining organic human beings were able to create the underground laboratories after the Liberation War. Surviving organic human beings that were almost wiped out in the android-induced genocide would not have been able to produce all of the infrastructure we see within Abyss and Altice Levoire in their fractured post-Liberation War state. This means the Humanity Liberation Front operated during the Liberation War and well after it, unbeknownst to Mothersphere and her new humankind above ground on Earth, up until a point. But I'll get to that a little later. During gameplay of Stellar Blade, when Eve explores the Levoirs, we come across laboratories and documents that tell us what Raphael Marx intended to do. Through manipulating the human genome, the main priority of the Human Liberation Front was to accelerate human evolution to make the organic species more powerful, to be able to contend with the Andro-Eidos. in hopes of one day taking back Earth. The Humanity Liberation Front's scientists' experiments yielded uncertain and random results in human evolution. There is documentation that Eve picks up that states test subjects were produced. Because the number of humans were most likely extremely low from being decimated by the Androidos in the Liberation War, the Humanity Liberation Front scientists did not have enough real humans to use in their experiments. So perhaps test subjects were grown from human DNA as clones or clone body parts. The produced subjects were exposed to rapid evolution, all of which resulted in random increases to offensive and defensive abilities. Test subjects may have been exposed to a virus that latched onto their DNA and provided evolutionary gains to that subject's genome. As Eve explores Altice and Abyss Levoire, she notices the enemies she encounters, these test subjects, look more human in form. It's here in these moments of gameplay that we start to realize the enemies we have been fighting for nearly half of Stellar Blade's length could actually be human. Here is where we start to understand the naming of these enemies as Naytiba, Naytiba being human beings. If we pull back a little and remember one of the earlier gameplay trailers for Stellar Blade, the Naytiba were originally called Natives, as in natives. This is a reference to Naytiba being the natives to Earth, the human beings that existed as the natives, or the original dominant species, to Earth before the Androidos. In the trailer, we can hear Adam say the word native in Korean. To English speakers, we hear Naytiba, and the English translation says native. That is because in the Korean language, the sounds made by the letters B and V are opposite that of their sounds in English. So if we listen again, Adam says native in Korean, but to English speakers it sounds like Naytiba, and the ah sound at the end is just an inflection in Korean. Korean and also some other Asian languages like Cantonese use inflections of a word using the ah sound at the end of words from time to time. When the game was in production and it was revealed that the enemies were called natives or natives, it was decided that this would not sit well when the game was translated to American English due to American culture and the history of indigenous people. It would have been insensitive for the protagonist of a video game to be killing thousands of enemies called natives, due to the parallels it would draw and potentially the negative thoughts it would evoke regarding the real-world genocide of many indigenous individuals and tribes from American history. Therefore, Shift Up decided to scratch the name native and adopt the name Naytiba. It actually worked out because Shift Up just spelled out in English letters the way native phonetically sounds in Korean. In my opinion, this turned out to be a pretty cool solution as it was a natural way to rename native, and it also showed Shift Up being sensitive to American indigenous people in the real world. For reasons that are never clarified in the game, during the time when the Humanity Liberation Front operated in their underground facilities, Raphael Marx decided to subject himself to the rapid evolution experiments as well. He was their leader and also an innovator of his time when he and Mothersphere operated together as the leaders of Eidos Industrial Company. So in this desperate state that the Humanity Liberation Front was in at this time, he decided to experiment on himself. He was no longer an innovator through technology, but now a hopeful innovator through the biology of human DNA. Raphael Marx was able to successfully evolve his human DNA while not becoming a mindless, violent mutation of his former self. In the nest, Adam, who is Raphael Marx, describes himself to Eve as the ultimate Naytiba, who has not succumbed to its hostile instincts. Raphael Marx and the scientists no doubt tried to replicate the success he experienced, but because the results of the rapid evolution when creating Naytiba from test subjects were always random, they simply could not do so. The Humanity Liberation Front's central computer, Rafi, has a few data logs that can be picked up by Eve. These shed light on some of the activities within the Humanity Liberation Front. The log data booting sequence is an introductory conversation between Raphael Marx and Rafi. This shows that the data logs containing Rafi are always with Raphael Marx, as Rafi confirms the ID of Raphael when it gives a prompt to enter admin ID credentials. At the end of this data log, Rafi states it answers to admin commands, so we know that all other data logs are between Rafi and Raphael Marx, since it is only ever shown that Raphael has an admin ID entered. A later data log, Cultivation Experiment, reveals a conversation between the two in which Rafi explains to Raphael Marx the results of one of the test experiments. Rafi uses the word you. I am not sure if Rafi is explicitly referring to Raphael Marx when it uses the word you as in a singular you, Raphael Marx, or if it means you as in all of the test subjects of a recent experiment. Because it was stated earlier that all results of the rapid evolution are random, it makes me think that Rafi is referring only to the experiment done to Raphael Marx. Rafi is explaining to Raphael Marx what his capabilities are as a newly evolved Naytiba, the ability to obtain energy from solar panels, electricity, chemical batteries, and organic and inorganic materials. Raphael Marx would be able to lose 40% of his body and still survive. It would also be at this time that Raphael Marx stops or slows his aging process. While speaking with Oracle in the presence chamber after the events of Abyss Levoire, Oracle informs Eve that part of the experiments the Humanity Liberation Front conducted on themselves was done with the goal in mind of extending human life expectancy. Oracle notes that organic humans live very short lives.
It was originally a facility for the purpose of genetically evolving mankind. After all, lifespans of the surviving humans were very short. That facility was the birthplace of what we have come to call Naytibas.
Because we know Adam, who is Raphael Marx, and Oracle are friends, during the events of Stellar Blade, Oracle would only know this knowledge if Adam told Oracle about how his life was extended through the successful experimentation on his genome. To further explore this likely possibility, The Lost 72 Years, the series of books cataloged by the historian of Zion named Luther, part 1 of this series states it has been 72 years since the reclassification of humankind, the end of the Liberation War, until the events of Stellar Blade. Perhaps it has been even longer than 72 years because the book would have needed to have been created/written before Eve picks it up. So perhaps it was written and existed for some time, maybe a few years, before Eve picked it up and read it. But since we don't know if that's true or not, the safest thing we can do is base the timeline off of what we know for sure, and that is the passage of 72 years as it is stated in the book. In the game, Adam looks no older than someone who is in their early 40s. That means in the events prior to the Liberation War, during the time in which he was still CEO of Eidos Industrial Company, he must have been near this age. The Liberation War would not have lasted long due to the combined abilities of Mother Sphere's omnipotence, due to her connection to the network, and the technologically superior race of Andro Eidos. The organic human beings were probably wiped out in less than a year's time. This puts Raphael Marx still at the age of around 40 years old when the Liberation War ended and he fled underground to Eltis and Abyss Levoire. We know that Raphael Marx's successful evolution into Naytiba occurs before the colony extinction. We are never given an exact number of years, but there are several documents and text descriptions stating that decades have passed since the colony extinction. The outbreak of Naytiba to Earth's surface happened before the colony extinction, as this event happened at the end of the final war, the war between the Naytiba and the Andro Eidos humans. So Adam's evolution into Naytiba happened well before the colony extinction, because Naytiba need to have been in existence for the final war and the eventual colony extinction to have taken place. So, we can dedicate a few decades of time to have taken place between the colony extinction and the events of Stellar Blade, perhaps a year or two for the events of the Final War and the evacuation of humanity that led up to the colony extinction, and a period of time before these events in which Adam's evolution must have taken place. Because Adam still looks around the age of 40, and because his aging either stopped or drastically slowed down, that puts his evolution into a Naytiba to likely have occurred in the first few years following the Liberation War. Raphael Marx, Adam, being alive and looking young would have been possible because of the successful rapid evolution he underwent, and he has not aged for several decades by the time Eve meets him in the opening moments of Stellar Blade. Naytiba are formed when a subject's DNA is altered to a point in which the entire genome is reorganized to create near instantaneous and random evolution in its subjects, with the potential for continuous and new evolutionary capabilities. The Humanity Liberation Front's main goal was to provide subjects with evolutionary offensive attack powers as well as defensive capabilities. Based on what we see in the large rooms that we battle Maelstrom in, test subjects were most likely given an injection or exposed to the red fluid material as a virus to latch onto and change organic human DNA. Because the evolutionary process is random, we therefore see a wide array of bizarre and profound results, with some Naytiba seemingly the product of one evolutionary goal in mind, while the evolutionary process in some Naytiba seem to be formed with several goals in mind. For example, from the gathered ecological information of the barnacle Naytiba, the large shell it uses is a result of it evolving competitively in a defensive manner alongside other vying predatory Naytiba. It developed a large shell as a defensive ability because so many other Naytiba around it were interacting with the barnacle in a predatory manner. Therefore, it had to evolve to protect itself. The Hydra Naytiba, on the other hand, evolved in multiple ways, having the ability to float using magnetic fields and the ability to camouflage itself in order to perform assassin-like attacks. In addition to this, even once a single or multiple evolutionary goals are taken into consideration, the DNA structures of Naytiba are described as always changing, demonstrating its ongoing and limitless ability to choose pathways to persist through evolution, making their powers and abilities mere infinite. As Stellar Blade progresses and Eve comes across new Naytiba, it becomes clear that Naytiba can take the form of almost anything. The fluid we see in the room we battle Maelstrom in is likely one path in which Naytiba spread their organics to quote-unquote infect something. Another way it spreads can be seen in Spire 4, the orbit elevator level. Here we see Naytiba spread down through the orbit elevator and into the lobby. Eve and Lily state to one another multiple times that they have never seen an outbreak to this magnitude. We know that Naytiba can spread and grow by accumulating mass. It's unknown what the prerequisites are for mass absorption. It seems that the mass absorbed needs to be conscious individuals or creatures, such as an organic human being, an androidos, or an animal or creature of Earth. Multiple creatures can also be accumulated to form one Naytiba entity. The Dozer Naytiba is an example of a mixture of creatures that were lumped together and grew into one individual mass, as its ecological information describes it as a bizarre mix of animal and insect. One of the standout components of Stellar Blade are the unique enemy designs of various Naytiba. Not only are they differentiated in their design, but also in their abilities to attack and defend themselves. Let's take a look at some of the capabilities of the lesser Minion and Warrior Naytiba classes. It's not until we get to the Elite Naytiba that we start to see some truly unique abilities and outlandish ecological information. By looking at the brute's information, we learn that the evolutionary potential of Naytiba is limitless, as its ability to attach machine cores to its body in order to draw power demonstrates Naytiba could essentially intake both mass and energy to result in boundless and devastating effects. This example demonstrates that the brute could draw power from machine cores, then discharge the energy as an offensive attack ability, seen as explosions, shockwaves, and ground blasts. The ability to discharge energy can also be seen in Abaddon's lightning chain and projectile attacks. Maelstrom has similar attacks to the aforementioned elite Naytibas. However, more interestingly, its ecological information clues us into how the outbreak of Naytiba occurred on Earth. A catastrophe occurred in Abyss Levoire in which a number of test subjects became uncontrollable, resulting in a critical containment failure, soaking up thousands of specimens into a vortex of sickening mass to become the giant monster we see. In the data log, Attack Detected, Rafi and Raphael Marx have an interaction in which they're discussing whether or not to move forward with initiating the final combination within the test subjects. There is added urgency to this conversation with an understanding that their time is running out because they are being attacked by Mothersphere. But if we look at the beginning of the text in the conversation, I am a little confused because of the mention of Mothersphere's airborne squads. Let me explain the timeline, then you'll get my confusion. When the Liberation War ended, the Humanity Liberation Front's efforts became a last-ditch attempt to enact revenge on their enemies, the Andro-Eidos. During this time, the Naytiba have not been created yet, and therefore have not begun to spread across Earth. That means the final war between the Naytiba and the Andro-Eidos humans and Mothersphere has not started yet. We know that the final war led to the Naytiba overrunning the Andro-Eidos humans, which led to their eventual evacuation to the colony at the orbit elevator. It wasn't until this time, when Mothersphere calculated the potential loss of her human androids, that she decided to initiate the colony extinction. These events wiped out most life on Earth, while some Andro-Eidos humans and Naytiba survived. It wasn't until after the colony extinction that Mothersphere started creating the angels in order to take back Earth from the Naytiba. So, angels only existed at a time after the final war ended, due to the colony extinction. And the final war happened only due to the outbreak of Naytiba across Earth's surface. Therefore, angels could not have existed at a time before Naytiba were present on the surface of Earth. So to come back to the Attack Detected data log, I'm really uncertain who Rafi is referring to when it states Mothersphere's airborne squads have our coordinates. This data log is found in Abyss Levoire, and it is clearly from a time before the Naytiba overrun Earth. Because airborne squads containing angels should not exist at this point in time, I'm going to infer that Rafi is not referring to angels. Rafi never says quote-unquote angels. It just says Mothersphere's airborne squad. This could mean one of Mothersphere's basic android aerial units. Although still strong and dominant over organic human beings, these are not the angel airborne squads we see in the game. So I do apologize here. Unless I'm making a speculative or theory type of video, I always try to share information based on facts. But for this, I simply cannot make sense of this gap in the timeline. So we'll just have to take a leap here and agree that Rafi may just mean the regular android army descending down to Abyss Levoire from above. If you have another thought or idea about what Rafi is actually referring to here, let me know in the comments section. To tie things back up to the contamination failure outlined in Maelstrom's ecological information, what most likely led to this was in his fleeting moments of time from the impending attack from Mothersphere, Raphael Marx made a rushed decision to initiate full production of the Humanity Liberation Front's Naytiba army, an army comprised of test subjects that were still unstable and whose final combination was simply not perfected. Raphael Marx and Rafi made a decision to start production because they had a fatalistic outlook on their future. Mothersphere had their location. Rafi apologizes to Raphael Marx for what it perceives as the inevitable doom of the Humanity Liberation Front, and they make a hope-filled effort to evolve in order to not be eaten by Mothersphere. They had no choice but to begin production on the unstable test subjects. In the next data log, Mass Production, we see Rafi entering into a hatred-filled bit of logic as it reasons as to what its version of humanity is. It contrasts Mothersphere's android humans, but views its creations in a similar way to how Mothersphere views her creations, simply as weapons, a means to gain victory and to annihilate Mothersphere. Here we can see the motto of the Humanity Liberation Front in Rafi's statement, "Freedom won with blood." As blood is a sign of organic species, in its view, the true humanity and the true form of life, contrasted to the created life of the Andro-Eidos and Mothersphere. In the Humanity Liberation Front's last data log, Quarantine Failure, we see how the biochemical contamination contaminates Rafi. Perhaps it is tied to what occurred with the elite Naytiba maelstrom, and the Humanity Liberation Front scientists did not anticipate the grotesque abomination that formed once the final sequence was initiated in the test subjects. We can understand that at this point, Maelstrom, Rafi, the scientists, and more start to become infected with the biochemical contamination and are evolved into different variations of Naytiba, inbred with a hatred toward the Andro-Eidos humans. In Legionnaire 212's memory stick found in Eidos 7, they question why the Naytibas attack humans. It's clear the Humanity Liberation Front programmed this into Naytiba, a hostility towards Andro-Eidos humans that comes across as natural instinct that Naytibas exude, as this Legionnaire likens their behavior as if they're carrying out orders engraved into their instincts. Finally, circling back to the Humanity Liberation Front's central computer, we can see Rafi infected, and even it becomes hostile as it becomes contaminated during the quarantine failure. Its waning words are "kill," repeated over and over. The quarantine failure leads to the destruction of Altice and Abyss Levoire. Naytiba spawn from the organic human beings inside Altice and Abyss Levoire, and humanity, true organic human beings, are no more. In their place, the Naytiba remain. Raphael Marx most certainly used his abilities as the only successful and stable Naytiba to escape during the outbreak. The Infector Naytiba Warrior Ecological Information states that it took months for the dust to settle from the irreversible catastrophe inside the facility. As months of time go by inside the facilities in which Naytiba continue to evolve and roam underground, the start of the final war occurs on Earth's surface as the Naytiba emerge and begin to infect their true enemies, Mothersphere's Andro-Eidos humans. Because Mothersphere wiped the memories of her Andro-Eidos human race, after the Liberation War, they have no understanding of the previous organic human race, fleeing underground at the end of the Liberation War. They don't even have a recollection of the Liberation War itself due to their memory wipe. The Andro-Eidos humans on Earth therefore cannot see the evolution of organic human beings into Naytiba because they simply don't have access to these memories or events. This is why we see in the memory sticks and documents of so many on Earth at this time stating their confusion over where the Naytiba came from. Naytiba continue to contaminate all regions on Earth, and the Andro-Eidos humans do everything they can to combat them. Mothersphere develops robots and new exospines to help combat the Naytiba. But to their surprise, the Naytiba are able to infect and carry out their evolutionary directives even in their android and robot body frames. The Naytiba were an extremely formidable enemy for Mothersphere's android race. During the final war, Mothersphere even requisitioned all of the corporate infrastructure of the Andro-Eidos humanity so that she could produce materials and resources for the war. With the requisitioned Eidos Industrial Company, Mothersphere created exospines with the intent of improving combat capabilities. This is why we see the exospines that were more militaristic-oriented used by the Angels and Legionnaires. Some exospines were created with the sole purpose of being attached to legionnaires' backs and being used on suicide missions. The Judgment-type exospine's description suggests Mother Sphere influenced these legionnaires to commit to suicide missions in which they were either praising or cursing her in the process. As seen with the contamination of the Humanity Liberation Front's central computer Rafi, Naytiba can even be produced within the robots that humanity deployed against the Naytiba. The initial realization of this must have been a horrid shock to the Andro-Eidos humans. During the final moments of the Liberation War, after Mother Sphere took the chosen Andro-Eidos humans to the colony, most of the guard turrets and other robots that were used to fight the Naytiba in the final war were contaminated by Naytiba. These infected machines now function with the same primary purpose of wiping out humankind, due to their robot bodies being contaminated with Naytiba. They continue their hunt as they target Eve during the events of Stellar Blade. Beyond the surface of Earth, Naytiba permeated any region that inhabited the Andro-Eidos humanity. The Stalker is an example of its evolutionary path being a product of the specific environment it is in, the depths of Matrix 11. Its ecological information states that it underwent dramatic mutations in the wet, dark, underground territories it roamed. Due to the absence of sunlight, it mutated and evolved to shed away sight. Its large, prolonged fingers and hands are a byproduct of it no doubt reaching out in the darkness to better find and grasp its prey. While the Stalker roamed the underground, the Karakuri is one of the elite Naytibas that grew from multiple amalgamations of the Karakuri series robots high above Earth's surface in the orbit elevator. These were similar to the Orisa series robots that operated inside the orbit elevators. While the Orisa robots served as maids within the individual personal elevators seen during Stellar Blade, it appears the Karakuri service robots functioned exclusively in the Prestige Lounge, as its geisha-like design matches the Japanese cherry blossoms aesthetics present inside the Prestige Lounge. The Karakuri Naytiba are the formation of body parts of several Karakuri robots and somehow have stayed independent from the larger entity within the orbit elevator, the Demogorgon. The ecological information of the Demogorgon suggests it was formed from the large amount of biomaterial accumulated in the orbit elevator during the last battles of the final war, when humanity was pushed to the evacuation point of the orbit elevator in their last-ditch effort to escape to the colony. What is most astonishing is the information stated in the elite Naytibas the Demogorgon spawns, the Democrawlers. The boss Eve faces in the central core of the orbit elevator. During the final war, several Andro-Eidos humans died inside the central core. These were the bodies that added to the growing mass of the larger cumulative Demogorgon. The humans that were trapped in the central core died while looking out at the nearby colony, longing to be safe in the beautiful towns that could be seen on the colony's surface. At the point in time of the death of these individuals, Mother Sphere had already evacuated some Andro-Eidos humans to the colony, leaving behind several others on Earth to try to find safety on their own, either attempting to force their way onto the colony or to find protection from the Legionnaires positioned throughout the orbital elevator. Therefore, these individuals that looked out longingly at the colony died with resentment and even rage towards the humans that did escape to the colony, the ones that Mother Sphere picked over them. These final emotions of the Andro-Eidos humans did not dissipate upon dying, and instead the feelings they had perpetuated in the mass that made up the Democrawler. This is why Eve responds in horror when she comes upon the Democrawler. Eve sympathizes with the individuals that make up the mass of the elite Naytiba, and she says she will end their suffering.
What have you done to yourself? I see all that pain. I'll put an end to it.
When we look at Belial, we see similarities in the way it was formed into a Naytiba. When we first start seeing snippets of and reading memory sticks referring to this Naytiba with the glowing red eye, we understand that Belial is different from any other Naytiba we've faced yet. Upon reading about the AI featured within the Belial-type droid, it seems to suggest that the AI is conscious. We know that AGIs are housed within the Androidos and Angels because they are conscious individuals. Considering the information presented to us from Belial, it seems that they too were housed with AGIs, or at least an AI that had near consciousness, or somewhat of a similar scope to the AI that made up the Androidos humans or angels. We can infer this because Belial's ecological information states that it was abandoned and forgotten. Although it never explicitly states that this is what Belial felt, the text continues and states Belial was contaminated with Naytiba in rage and hatred. Feeling abandoned or forgotten, rage and hatred, these are human emotions. We know that Belial acts differently from other Naytiba, based on the evidence of the Democrawler, how as it was formed, it took in the resentment and longing of the Androidos humans looking out at those that were safely on the colony. We could conclude Belial was formed into a Naytiba in a similar way of absorbing the emotions of the being it is latched onto. In the case of Belial, the Orca Aerospace flagship combat robot. This is why it is stated that it rose up. The Naytiba evolved the combat robot into a demon-like Naytiba, Belial, whose name in Christian religion means devil. After the final war, during the events of Stellar Blade, we see several Naytiba still roaming Earth. Most are Naytiba that were present during the final war, but some are new formations made primarily from the remaining biomatter and robot/android masses spread across Earth. Lumps are one such Naytiba. They are described as mutated monsters reborn from the rotting corpses of individuals deceased from the final war. We also see 5 out of the 6 alpha Naytibas formed in this time. The Demogorgon is by scale the largest alpha Naytiba in Stellar Blade. Its mass is a product of all the biomaterials which accumulated at Spire 4, the orbit elevator which became the evacuation point for the Androidos humans to flee to the colony. Although Mother Sphere's intentions were to only evacuate the humans she chose to live on the colony, once word got out that humans were being evacuated to the orbit elevator, it attracted others that were not chosen as well. Because of this, the orbit elevator acted as a choke point that perhaps benefited the Naytiba as it bottlenecked all escaping humans into a funneled mass. The Naytiba easily took over the fleeing humans and remaining legionnaires present at Spire 4. Many human beings died in the Spire while evacuating upward to the colony. What most likely happened is that in the evacuation process, several humans were already contaminated with Naytiba, and as they made their way into the colony, they became a threat to potentially contaminate all of the colony and even Mother Sphere. Side note, Mother Sphere is likely housed in the colony, as this would be a way she could physically be above Earth in a high heavenly position and perpetuate her godness to the Androidos humans below her on Earth. The threat of infecting the colony is the reason for Mother Sphere jettisoning several modules from the colony. This solved the issue of inevitable trace levels of contamination that occurred during the evacuation. By this, I mean that because there was such a high level of contamination and Naytiba present in the orbit elevator during the evacuation process, the Androidos humans fleeing into the colony most likely had at least some small trace levels of contamination. The modules that Mother Sphere ejected from the colony not only solved the threat of potential colony contamination, but also greatly decreased the number of Naytiba that were still present on Earth's surface, as the modules acted as cataclysmic meteorites made of metal that impacted all over Earth that I outlined earlier in this video. After these events, the orbit elevator remained flooded with the deceased Androidos humans and the remaining biomaterials of dead Naytiba from the final war. It is unclear where exactly the Demogorgon and its alpha core originated from, but it appears to simply be a product of the large amount of biomass compiled and available, as so much of it was bottlenecked into this one area. Due to the Naytiba's undying drive to exterminate humanity, when the Demogorgon came to be after the final war, it traveled upward, accumulating more mass, becoming the grotesque, angel-like figure we see in Stellar Blade. Driven by its hatred towards Andro Eidos humans, as it evolved more and more into the enormous Alpha Naytiba, it traveled outside the orbit elevator's zenith in hopes of somehow adhering to the colony so that it could achieve its goal of overrunning the android humans on the colony. The remaining Alpha Naytiba, with the exception of Gigas, are the result of being turned by someone before them. These are the unidentified Naytiba/Raven, Taki, and Orkle. I'll only touch briefly here about Raven and Orkle because this video is getting quite long and I'd like to discuss these and all the characters of Stellar Blade in greater detail in future videos. With regards to them as Alpha Naytibas, how they are actually formed works through typical exposure to Naytiba, and it seems they develop an alpha core based on some principles: their power, abilities, or in the case of the Demogorgon, their mass. Raven is damaged upon hearing the truth about Mothersphere. We see this as we watch each new Legacy recording until we witness her complete degradation and descent into madness when we battle her in the penultimate boss battle. We know that Adam's main goal after the final war is to fuse his ultimate Naytiba body with a hyper-advanced Andro Eidos body, the body frame of an android, to bring forth a new stage of humankind. A hyper-advanced body frame is presented to him in Raven, but he chooses not to fuse with her because of her damaged psyche. If you want to hear more about that topic, I go into a detailed breakdown of Raven's loss of humanity, as well as a handful of other characters and their relationship to this topic in my other video here, titled Stellar Blade's Ending and Theme: What Does It Mean to Be Human? I'll also link that video in the description below. Although Adam chooses not to fuse his Naytiba body with Raven, he knows he can still use her. Her ecological information states that all the elder Naytiba, Adam, had to do was push her a little bit towards a longing of revenge towards Mothersphere. But more importantly for Adam, he only had to push her a bit towards worship of him as the elder Naytiba as well. He therefore infected her body with his Naytiba blood. Because of her advanced angel body frame, she developed an alpha core and became an alpha Naytiba. Her evolutionary path developed in a number of ways. She grew a durable black outer shell and immediately took on more mass and size, developed the ability to fly with a pair of dark harpy-like wings, and sprouted 2 scythes that replaced her hands to ensure her great offensive capabilities, as seen with what she did to Taki in the opening moments of Stellar Blade. When Raven's alpha core is ripped out of her by Eve, we see Raven being purged from this shell as it disintegrates in a pool of blood. Adam must have picked Orkle to undergo a fusion with him that is similar to what Adam does with Eve in the nest at the end of Stellar Blade. This was Adam's very first attempt, and it happened during the events of the final war. It had to have happened in this time because Orkle tells Eve that as an alpha Naytiba, his body was demolished by the destruction of the colony extinction. Adam had to have captured Orkle when he was still an Andro Eidos human, then tried an attempt at a fusion and failed. But instead of discarding Orkle, Adam turned him into a Naytiba. Orkle's ecological information states that upon the failure, the elder Naytiba, Adam, blessed him with a second chance. Adam contaminates Orkle's body and he evolves into an alpha Naytiba. Orkle undoubtedly evolved in a similar manner as Raven and formed a shell-like body similar to what Raven becomes as the unidentified Naytiba. However, we never see this form of Orkle because he states that after he was saved by the remaining humans from the wreckage of the colony extinction, he lost all will to fight. He was shown humanity and kindness by these android humans and sealed off the Alpha Naytiba within the Alpha core in his body. In terms of how this is actually possible, we don't know. But Orkel uses the humanity he gained from the others to help him shed the evolutionary battle shell, and we therefore don't ever see it. By the time we meet Adam in the nest, we have the ability to steer the story in two different directions. If we choose not to take Adam's hand, Adam embraces the hostility he once controlled and grows his own evolutionary battle shell, similar to what Raven became in the unidentified Naytiba. He grows 3 hands in a reflection of the 3 angel wings he already possesses. In each hand he wields a spear. Adam accumulates more mass and more than triples in size. His battle shell and wings make him quite formidable for Eve to battle, but he is still eventually dispatched by her. His shell disintegrates around him, leaving his more human-like body in the arms of Eve for a final farewell. In his defeat, he gives Eve a few final words and then eventually departs Eve's embrace, leaving behind his organic human skeleton. The impact of this decision by Eve is expressed from Adam here.
Adam, I'm sorry.
Eve. With this, the history of humans is over. Your will, your actions, your decisions. I just hope that everyone is guided in the right direction.
Adam.
Although he is Naytiba, he was originally a human being, a native to the land of Earth. He is the last real organic human being, so if you choose not to take Adam's hand, true organic human beings are no more. Andro-Eidos are made from nanotechnology, polymer material, and other machine parts. They are not composed of any human DNA. With the collapse of the nest, true organic human beings cease to be as Adam's skeletal remains are crushed by the falling debris. This ending is quite tragic as there are no remaining traces of true organic human DNA, no way to carry on the legacy of true organic human beings. Luckily for us, from what the Stellar Blade community has posted and made vocal, it seems that the agreed upon more canonical ending is what happens if Eve takes Adam's hand, as it allows for the fulfillment of Adam's plan to fuse Naytiba that contains an already evolved version of human DNA with the most advanced and unisonous Andro-Eidos body frame, so that a new being that is hyper-advanced while still containing human DNA can be created. This fusion can therefore bring forth a new version of humanity that contains the essence of both species, organic human beings and Andro-Eidos. It is unknown what this path forward means for the Naytiba bloodline. If we get potential sequels to Stellar Blade, they will have to answer more questions regarding Naytiba. Is Adam's consciousness alive but just dormant somewhere within this new Eve? Are there even any traces of Naytiba blood inside Eve after her fusion with Adam? If so, does the Naytiba blood within Eve allow her spontaneous and new evolutionary capabilities? I could go on, but with Stellar Blade wrapped up, the story of where the ultimate Naytiba bloodline goes is left to how these questions about Eve will be answered in the hopeful continuation of Stellar Blade in future sequels. Thank you for joining me on this one. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of this part of the Stellar Blade lore, the Naytiba, or anything else you want to discuss. I'll be jumping down into the comments section below to keep up the discussion with you all there. I truly appreciate your time. See you on the next one, and may your memories live on forever.